Hi, everyone. Welcome to the 2/22/22 Long Meadow Select Board meeting. This is Select Board Chair Mark Strange. I'll be confirming that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Steve Morantz. Steve Morantz. Josh Levine. Nothing. Tom Lacusa.
Hey, 1 second, Mark. There's an issue going on with their.
Off to a very bizarre start.
Usually that's allowed already. All right, it's good now.
Mark, I'm here.
Retry.
Hey, Tom.
Okay, good.
Josh Levine.
I'm here as well.
Steve Morantz.
Here.
Mark Gold.
Here.
Staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Corinne Meisie-Munz.
Here.
Mike Barbieri.
Here.
Lynn Simmons is on vacation this week. This open meeting of the Long Meadow Select Board is being conducted remotely, consistent with Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021. This meeting is convening by Zoom webinar, as posted on the agenda and the town's website, identifying how the public may join. There is no chat or Q&A function. All the materials for this meeting are available on the agenda posted on longmeadow.org. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless I note otherwise. Each vote taken in this meeting will be conducted by a roll call vote. This meeting will feature resident comment. Resident comment using the Zoom webinar format. Members of the public are attendees. If a member of the public would like to speak during resident comment, please use the raise hand icon at the bottom of the screen. The meeting moderator will promote you to panelist, unmute you, and give you permission to speak. If you join the webinar by phone, dial *9 to raise your hand and *6 to mute and unmute. Residents who wish to speak will identify their names and addresses only, and each individual is afforded 3 minutes for comments. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that some attendees are participating by video conference. Please mute your phone or your computer when you're not speaking. Okay, first item on the agenda tonight is our announcements. And just a reminder to everyone that nomination papers for the 2022 annual town election are available now until Friday, March 4th, which is a couple weeks. Information for interested candidates is available in the town clerk's office, which is located at 20 William Street, or you can call 413-565-4103. And you can also go on the town's website and click on the clerk's page for more information. Also, at long last, the select board will be meeting in person starting our next meeting, which is March 7th. Looking forward to seeing everybody again in person. And I believe the public will be welcome to attend if they wish. And I think we're going to try to do a hybrid meeting, which would allow folks to call in via Zoom and participate that way as well. Stay tuned for that. Okay, next up we have board and committee appointments. Looking for a motion to appoint Alexander Aiken to the Capital Planning Commission for a 3-year term expiring June 30th, 2024.
So moved. Second.
Any other discussion? Mike, can you call the roll, please?
Mr. Strange?
Yes.
Mr. Morantz,
Yes.
Mr. Levine,
Yes.
Mr. Gold,
Yes.
and Mr. Lucusa.
Yes.
Okay, so tonight we have a public hearing at 7:15 on a liquor license violation. And we also have our joint meeting with our special guest stars tonight, the school committee and the finance committee. We don't have time to do that between now and 7:15. So why don't we see if any residents have comments?
Just a reminder, press the raise hand icon at the bottom of the screen if you would like to give a comment. I don't see anyone right now.
Okay, we can do select board comments. Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, since our last meeting, I've attended a few different meetings. I just wanted to report on them, and I thought this was a good opportunity to do so. The recycling committee had met, and they were just confirming that they have a May shredding event for the town. So watch for the formal announcement. It's going to be on a Saturday. I think it's the 17th of May, but I'm not quite sure the date. At the Long Meadow High School parking lot, limit of 2 boxes of shredding items per person. But it's been a success in the past, and they're doing it again. I also attended a Pioneer Valley Planning Commission meeting of the Metropolitan Planning Organization, MPO. They look at traffic projects and TIP projects, and just wanted to note that the TIP project, part of the TIP project for Long Meadow Route 5 is currently on the 2024 docket. There's some some issues with that, only because with the new federal funding, there may be additional money, may change the date a little bit. There's also an additional Route 5 resurfacing the entire road that's now in the docket. And Walter Gunn, who represents the town of Long Meadow, although he's representing the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission on this thing, this group, is also going to be looking at that. So as that date may change or may be modified for those projects, we'll continue to report back to the select board on potential funding for those. The bigger meeting I went to was Scannick Valley Regional Health Trust. That meeting a couple of weeks ago, they voted their fiscal 2023 rate. They again decided to use some of their reserves, which are diminishing. This year they dipped into their reserves by about $1 million to hold the rates. They're going to do the same thing next year. And even though the indicators, all the calculations and the people advising them said rates were going up pretty significantly, they will be holding the rates to a 7% increase for our employees and retirees. The increase in healthcare rates. So those rates, since we pay 50% and employees pay 50%, the town's rates will be going up 50%, going up 7% for our share of those funds. We've confirmed that, and Jennifer Layton now has that as part of our budget. It's clearly not what we thought it would be, hopefully, but certainly not as bad as it could have been. Projections are 8.5% to 10% increases and most systems. So, we have a pretty good system in Scannick Valley with a regional healthcare, with a local group of people. We have some good experience, but my watch out is that if they continue to eat into their reserves next year, not only will we get the increase we want, but we'll be rebuilding reserves, and we could get a substantial hit on healthcare costs next year. But I just wanted to report on those to the board.
Thank you. And just to follow up on Mark's report, so that's 7%. This is for the public who's watching or may watch later. We try to stay to a budget increase of between 1.75% to 2.5% every year. So somehow we have to absorb a 7% increase on our health insurance. for employees and retirees. We also got hit with, I think, 11% from the Hamilton County Retirement Board. Those are significantly above 2.5%. So, you know, our financial people and our board members do a phenomenal job trying to get us to where the finance committee and where we want to be. That just gives a little bit of perspective of how difficult it is. Yeah, Tom.
Yeah, just a comment. The other day I was looking for some services for a person, and I dialed 411. Or no, I'm sorry, 211, which is to get information on any kind of social service programs. And I was transferred to Connecticut. Now, I live in Massachusetts, and when I dial 911, I'm also transferred to the Connecticut because of the way the poles are set up for cell phones. I think I'm starting to wonder, you know, if I will ever be part of the state. It doesn't look good. There's probably no plans to include this part of Longmeadow in Longmeadow because the phone companies that own the poles or hold the relay centers for cell phones probably not a priority to them. But if I dial for local services, I would like to get local services on the other end of the line. I don't know what we can do about it. I guess I'm just trying to make this present. I know the town manager is going to be watching this, and you know, I don't know if there's anything she can do. I'm hoping that when the new cell phone towers are operational in town, that I actually become part of Massachusetts and no longer get my calls all routed to Connecticut. Thank you.
Sounds like we might need to check your residency status.
Yeah, I guess so. I just filled out my whatever it is, the census too.
Mark, can I ask Corinne to just have the fire chief check on? I mean, that, you know, 211 bothers me, but 911 really is wrong. And you know, we spent a lot on the emergency 911 system, cell towers going into the central system. If calls in Longmeadow are still going to Connecticut, there's something screwed up. And I think at least we ought to get a response from the, you know, fed back to us through the fire chief about how that's happening and whether that's supposed to happen or that was an aberration.
Yeah, Mark, the last time I talked to him, he said, you know, they just switch it over, but it's an added step to have them switch it. So.
I'll check in with Chief Dearborn and get back to you.
Thank you.
Any other select board comments? Okay. Mike, do we have any residents that raised their hand?
No, I do not see anyone. I could start moving people in for the hearing, and by then it'll probably be 7:15. That works.
Do it.
Also, if we have representatives from Ume Asian Bistro, can you please press the raise hand icon at the bottom of the screen? Thank you.
Can you hear us?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thanks.
Mark, I'll make a motion to open the hearing for the Ume Asian Bistro liquor license violation.
A second motion to open.
Mike, can you call the roll, please?
Mr. Strange,
Yes.
Mr. Morantz,
Yes.
Mr. Levine,
Yes.
Mr. Gold,
Yes.
Mr. Lakusa.
Yes.
Okay, very good. So it looks like we had a liquor license violation sometime in late December 2021. And I think we have Officer Chaplin here, or Chief Stocks, to give us a rundown or a recap of the report and what they saw.
Mark, this is a formal hearing. You need to swear in anybody who's going to offer testimony at this hearing. You didn't get a procedure. I mean, if I know it's the first time we've done this, but the procedure is you need to swear in anybody who's going to speak, not public comments, but anybody from either side.
Okay. Do we have anybody from the police department? I see Officer Chaplin's.
Yeah, he's there.
There he is. Can you hear us, officer?
Yes, I can.
Okay. So I guess raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Yes, I do.
Thank you. So Officer Chaplin, can you give us a, oh, there you are. Can you give us a recap of what happened in December?
Yeah, it's December 29, 2001. I can read my original report to it, and then I have a supplement for just UMI itself. So as follows: on Wednesday, December 29, 2021, from 4:41 p.m. to 5:40 p.m., I conducted checks of the establishment licensed by the town of Long Meadow to sell alcoholic beverages. My undercover operatives, a 19-year-old female and a 19-year-old male, volunteered to assist the LPD with alcoholic compliance checks. The female was wearing a gray jacket, green sweater, black leggings, and gray boots. The male was wearing navy blue long sleeve shirt, blue jeans, white. Photographs of both volunteers were taken, and they were read and agreed to, understanding the parameters of the operation. Both volunteers signed the compliance check guidelines. We used the compliance check guidelines set forth by the Alcohol Beverages Control Commission. They also each took a portable breath test, which indicated they did not have any presence of alcohol on their breath. It should be noted that both volunteers were vaccinated against COVID-19 and chose not to wear face masks in each establishment. The volunteers rode along with me in car 7, which is a gray unmarked Ford police vehicle. At 4:41 p.m., we arrived at our first location, the Long Meadow Package Store. At each establishment, I would park so I could clearly watch the volunteers enter and exit the establishment. Only the volunteers would enter and exit unless they were served alcohol or successfully purchased an alcoholic beverage. And my supplemental narrative goes, at 5:01 p.m., we arrived at UMI Asian Bistro. I parked in a parking space directly in front of Bank of America, but I could clearly see the front door of UMI. The volunteers entered the restaurant and sat at 2 open bar seats. Both volunteers spoke with the female bartender and ordered Bud Light bottles. They were told that the Bud Light bottles were unavailable, so they ordered Coors Light bottles. The bartender placed the drinks in front of the volunteers without asking for identification, and the female volunteer then sent me a text message informing me that they had just been served. I entered the restaurant and watched as both volunteers left their seats at the bar and walked towards me. The female volunteer told me the only female bartender behind the bar was the woman who served them the alcohol. I sat down in front of both alcoholic beverages and had the female bartender, later identified as Graziella Pasente, come over to speak with me. I asked if she had asked the 2 individuals for identification, and she stated she didn't remember as she was pretty busy. I advised her that she had just served 2 19-year-olds Coors Light. She had apologized to me, and then I obtained her identification, and I spoke with the owner of UMI, Hang Huang, who was in the back kitchen, and I advised him of the situation. He was advised that he will be receiving a hearing date in the mail. Thank you.
Thank you, Officer Chaplin. And did you send a copy of that report, or did the representatives from UME receive a copy of your report?
Yes, my Lieutenant Jerkowski sent that.
Thank you. And representatives from UME, can you just say your names for the record, please?
Graziella Presenti. Say your name, Presenti.
Han Zhang Fong.
Do you have a response or rebuttal to Officer Chapman's report?
No, I when he had asked me, I told him I knew why he was there. I did not check their IDs. I've been in the service industry for over 23 years, and this is my first time this has ever happened to me. As you know, a lot of restaurants are short-staffed. I'm not blaming because I was busy. Usually I do card a lot because I've always worked in the industry. So, but I do remember that night I didn't. So I didn't, I gave the officer my ID, and I did apologize. I understand the severity of the situation, but I didn't deny anything or anything. I knew what I had done wrong.
Ms. Vicente, did you have tips or safe serve training?
Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Of course, every 3 years.
Okay. Do we have I want to say that UME had a previous violation. Do we have that record?
Yes, I do. There was one in 2019, and I believe 2 in 2013 as well. Those are the only ones that I saw on file. So I have those as well, those records. One in 2019. What was the year of the other two, Mike? There was 2 in 2013. And do you remember what we did in 2019? Yeah, there was according to the select board policies, in terms of liquor license violations, I believe there was a 5-day liquor license suspension. I can confirm right now if you just give me 1 second. Sure, that does sound right, but if you could confirm. Do any select board members have any questions or comments? Go ahead, Mark.
My only comment is I went back in my records and I can confirm what Mike just said. I actually thought one was in late 2012, the other in 2013, but essentially there were 2 back then, and one it was November 2019. So I confirm those dates.
So where do we go from here?
I'm sorry. Who are you speaking with?
I'm talking to the board members.
Oh,
Josh.
I'm sorry.
Josh had something he wanted to ask.
Yeah. Who's the manager of record on the license?
That would be Hang Zhang Wang, I believe is his name.
Yeah, it's me. It's him.
So, your responsibility, Mr. Lang, to make sure everyone is following the guidelines, both for the town and for state liquor licensing.
Yes.
And I have as a new member to the planning board, to the select board, and this is to my fellow members, especially Mark and Tom. Is there a timeline on a liquor violations policy when, for lack of a better term, the violations were set, or is this for the life of the license that we generally follow the gradations of the penalties?
So Josh, I can answer that because we've had that exact discussion, and the answer was there is no reset, but we would use reasonable judgment moving forward. So, is 10 years of reset 2012 is 10 years ago, or 2013 versus 2019. But the fact is there is no formal reset written into the policy.
I think that is reasonable. I'm glad we have some discretion in there because otherwise an entire regime could change, and you're not necessarily. It depends what your purpose of your policy is, I guess. But all right, that's good to know.
Do you recall the same thing as I said?
Yeah, I do recall that. Yeah, and the and we're looking at a 2019 violation and a 2021 violation. So obviously the 5-day suspension didn't have much of an impact.
Right. So Mark, in terms of procedure, generally what we'll do is if we have questions for Officer Chaplin or for the folks from UMI, we can ask that as part of the hearing. Then generally we'll close the hearing, and then the select board would deliberate outside of the hearing. That's generally been the process. But if I don't have any questions. I think the facts have been stated and essentially agreed to. But if anybody else does otherwise, I think we could close the hearing, then deliberate.
Okay. Yeah, I agree, Mark. Do any other select board members have questions for either Officer Chaplin or for the OMA representatives? Josh?
No, my question would be for deliberation, actually.
Okay.
I'll move then that we close the hearing.
Okay.
Unless the folks from UMI have anything else they want to add, or there's somebody from the public who wants to add anything, I guess. But
I don't see anybody from the public.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll second the motion to close the hearing.
Mike, can you call the roll, please?
Mr. Strange?
Yes.
Mr. Morenz?
Yes.
Mr. Levine?
Yes.
Mr. Gold?
yes.
Mr. Lacusa?
Yes.
Okay, so now the public hearing, just for everybody's information, the public hearing is now closed, which means there's no more input from either party, and this is the select board's chance to deliberate amongst ourselves.
So do we stay on?
You guys stay on, yeah.
Okay.
What do we think? Yes, Steve?
Well, I think that between 2012 and 13 and 21, end of 21, essentially 22 is a long time. There was a violation in 2019. According to the rules here, first violation is warning. Second violation is 2 to 5 days suspension. Third is 6+. Fourth is 30. Since I had a 5-day suspension in 2019, which I guess somehow was considered their second one, since culpability has been fully accepted, they do have tips. I think it is the second one within 2 years. I would think that the 5-day suspension would be a reasonable action on our part, and that's what I would move. That's what I would propose.
Yeah, as I looked at it, my first reaction was to think of a 10-day suspension, actually. But I guess I think I'd be willing to go with a 7-day suspension, like a week long. So.
For what it's worth, I agree with Tom. I think that somewhere in the 6 or 7 days, 7 days suspension, I think that because the last one was a 5-day, and that would be consistent with what we've tried to establish.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was thinking 6 myself.
Yeah, I'm on the other side of the table on these a lot, and I tell my clients that you get the warning, and that should scare the hell out of you, because what's coming next is a suspension, and you have to take it seriously. And a 5-day suspension, I know things have been tough for restaurants and bars the last 2 years, but that's no excuse, and that's what the TIPS training is for. That's what the manager of record is for, to make sure that those are being followed. And if a 5-day really should have scared the hell out of UME, and I think that we got to add on a little bit. So I would think 7 is a fair amount.
Mark, with that discussion, I'd like to, because I think we need to do this, I'd like to propose, I just pulled out a a calendar, propose a suspension that the Umi restaurant turn in their, forfeit their liquor license on Friday, March 11th, to be returned to them on Friday, March 18th. And if they can turn it during business hours on March 11th, and pick it up during business hours on March 18th, that becomes 7 days.
When is St. Patrick's Day?
I didn't even think about that. I think it's in that period of time.
Can we go like the week before or the week after that?
It's okay with me. I just picked those dates at random. Fine. You want to do March 4th through March 11th?
Sure.
Sure. Didn't even think of that. Thanks. I'll make
17th.
I'll make a motion that we suspend the liquor license of Umi's from Friday, March 4th during normal business hours prior to noon, because that's when our select board office closes, and they can pick it up on Friday, March 11th to resume sales that weekend.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Any further discussion? Okay, Mike, can you call the roll, please?
Mr. Strange,
Yes.
Mr. Morantz,
Yes.
Mr. Levine,
Yeah.
Mr. Gold,
Yes.
Mr. Lucusa.
Yes.
So Ms. Vicente, just so we're clear. So on March 4th, somebody from Ume needs to come and drop off their liquor license with the town.
Okay, I'm sorry, that's at 29 Williams Street?
William Street, yes.
Town Hall? Okay.
Yeah.
All right, before noon, you said?
Yeah, then you can come back and pick it up around before noon on the following Friday.
Thank you for the consideration of St. Patrick's Day. I appreciate that.
No problem.
Thank you.
Good luck to you guys.
Thank you. All right, take care. Thanks.
Bye.
All right, Simon, so.
Thanks to Officer Chapman.
Thank you.
Okay. Now the moment we've all been waiting for. Our joint meeting with the school committee and the finance committee. Do you guys need to kind of open your own meetings, or is it okay to be subsumed within our meeting?
Mark, I think usually they open their own meetings, but I'm not positive the guideline for that. I think typically they do open up their own meetings.
We will need to. There'll be a quorum of the school committee finance subcommittee, so they'll need to call a meeting to order.
Okay. So why don't we get rid of that now? Why don't we have Kevin and Armand respectively call your meetings to order, and then we'll flip it over to Marty.
I'll let Dr. Shea lead.
Thanks, Mark. Thank you.
Right, honorable friend.
I'd like to call the school committee finance subcommittee meeting to order on February 22nd.
And this is a regular meeting for us. So this is Armin Ray, chair of the finance committee. I'll be confirming all members and persons anticipated are present and can hear me. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Let's see, we got Nora.
Here. Yes.
Don Griffith.
Yes, I'm here.
Andrew Lamb.
Here.
William Welch.
Here.
Maury Garrett. Maury.
Here.
And Armin Ray here. You already read the preamble on the remote meeting, so we're good.
All right, thanks, guys, and thank you, Marty, and for coming tonight. And I'm not sure if it's going to be you or Tom going through your presentation, but whoever is going to be doing that, you can take it away.
And thanks so much. I think Jamie or Kevin was going to kick it off and then turn it over to me.
Yeah, I think that was me. At first, just thank you to everybody for coming together tonight. I know that all of us on the school committee are really proud of the budget that Tom and Marty have put together. We think that it is a responsible budget and one that recognizes the challenges that we have. And I think that's part of the story that Marty's going to tell you is, we've had 2 really challenging years, and it's not going away. And I think Marty's going to explain really well, why we need the budget that we're proposing to help the kids who are struggling, because a lot of kids are struggling right now. And so, I know that the numbers are super important, but I also want to make sure folks listen to the story that Marty is telling, and the kids that we need to help, because it's been a rough couple of years, and it's not going to get easier or automatically go away next year. So again, thank you to Tom and Marty for all their work putting this together, and Marty will take the lead and go through it. So thanks, Marty.
All right. Yeah, thanks so much. Kevin framed it really well, and so I'll spare you those types of prefatory comments, but I do want to thank the school committee for its leadership, the finance subcommittee especially, and also thanks to town manager and to Jen Layden for helping us along the way and getting us to this point. And special thanks to Tom Mazza, our assistant superintendent for finance and operations, who's on the call and no doubt can assist with any questions that you might have. So I think, Mike, you have the slide deck, or do you want me to share it?
I can do it if that works with you.
Sure, that's fine.
All right, can everyone see that all right?
That's good.
Yeah. So this is the school committee approved FY23 budget. It was approved on February 15th following an initial recommendation at the end of January and following a public hearing. So Kevin and Jamie have endured this slide deck. I think this is now their 4th time. So I appreciate them. I'll beg their forgiveness. So Mike, you can shoot right to the first slide there. We think that as Kevin framed the discussion, we think that this is a goals-driven budget. We think that it hits some key targets, both sort of educational and strategic, but also operational. It will no doubt help us meet our contractual obligations to staff. We've been talking a lot in Long Meadow Public Schools about the continuum of services across the academic, behavioral, and social emotional spectrums, and ensuring that we're meeting kids where they are. And as Kevin suggested, the pandemic has no doubt disrupted the education of many students. And so we want to continue to be responsive to that. Certainly, we heard at the top of your meeting in the comments that Mark and others made that there are some significant variables that have been thrown your way in terms of health insurance and in terms of retiree benefits. And so, we take it very seriously that our responsibility to present a budget that is manageable and sustainable. And we also, for a long time, have prioritized a class size in Long Meadow Public Schools, and yet this is a budget also that is responsive to some shifting enrollment patterns. I won't get too deep into that tonight, but I'll give you just maybe a quick glimpse of that as we move on. So Mike, you can hit the next slide. So I wanted to spend, I think this slide tells an important story, and I've highlighted in yellow the increase that is projected from the governor's budget in Chapter 78. And this increase of $736,934 that, again, just projected in the initial governor's budget is the largest Chapter 70 increase that I've experienced in my career. And I went back as far as I could with Long Meadow's Chapter 78, and it appears that this is the largest single increase that we've experienced as a community. And it's an increase, frankly, that I've been sort of waiting for my entire career, and it's something that I've seen the need for. It really is reflective of the increased need that we're seeing among students, not just in Long Meadow, but across the Commonwealth, across the country. It's a reflection of the heightened expectations that are on us as educators. It's also a reflection, I think, of a statewide consensus around the true costs of running a public school district. And, you know, though this is coming, it's coming at a good time on the heels of the pandemic, but it's really the culmination of probably almost a decade's worth of work at the state level around studying the adequacy of the state funding formula. And it was back in 2015 that there was a Foundation Budget Review Commission that concluded really strongly. It was a bipartisan, really in-depth study that had been completed, and concluded that the state funding formula was deficient, that it really didn't reflect the true costs of running a school district. And it's based on a funding formula that was developed back in 1993, long before a lot of the current realities were upon us. So this increase that we're anticipating in Chapter 78 is really encouraging. But again, I think it's an overall reflection of what our students need from us, what the students of Long Meadow need from us, and what is expected of us here in Long Meadow Public Schools. The good news is I have every reason to believe that this is a number that will hold, that it will make its way through the legislative process. And the other encouraging thing to remember is that this builds our Chapter 70 base. So this is a number that will be essentially folded into Chapter 78 revenue that we will receive in subsequent years. So I know, certainly we've all talked a lot about the impending tax ceiling and the fiscal challenges that we're facing here in Long Meadow. I think this is really good news for us, and it will be interesting to see how this plays out as the state budget develops. But again, I have every reason to believe that number or a number close to that will hold and make its way through the legislative budget development process. This represents the other encouraging thing is, again, all this is dependent on, it's subject to appropriation at the state level, but this is a 1/6 phase-in of the Student Opportunity Act. And that Student Opportunity Act was legislation that is reflective of that Foundation Budget Review Commission. So it really is the state stepping up its commitment, its local aid commitment in terms of aid for schools. So that's really, I think it's important that we all understand that and that we all continue to advocate for Chapter 78, because it especially for communities out here in Western Mass, it's really critical and it's needed. And not to beat a dead horse here, but it really is reflective of what the modern realities are, what the realities are of educating kids nowadays. So next slide, Mike. This is just an overall enrollment snapshot from January of this year. I call your attention to this just for one reason, is that you'll see that in recent years, we've received some budgetary relief because the number of elementary sections that we've needed has slowly gone down. And so in the coming year, however, we're anticipating that we're going to need to run the same number of elementary sections, meaning the same number of elementary classrooms. So right now we have 64 elementary classrooms, I think it is, and we're expecting that we will be running the same number next year. So the budgetary relief that we've seen in recent years because of decreases in elementary enrollment, we're not expecting to see that in the coming year. As we look at the census data, it appears that our kindergarten enrollment is going to be in the 200 range. So it'll be comparable to those classes that we currently see in 5th or 6th grade. So you can see, our classes at the at the high school level are larger, and there are some reductions that we will see in the coming year and perhaps subsequent years as that larger group of students makes its way out of Long Meadow High. Next slide, Mike. Could you, Mike, can you back up a little bit? I feel like there was one slide that, oh, here, I'm sorry, we missed this. I took the liberty of grabbing a slide from the last time the school committee, finance committee, and select board came together. And this was a slide from the presentation that the town manager and the finance director had put together. I think I just include this because it was kind of a baseline that we were working off of, and it was an early acknowledgement, I think, all around that, if just looking at our contractual obligations to staff, that we were looking at, even projecting back in December, we were looking at a projection of around $900,000. And so that's just taking care of our contractual obligations alone, with a modest, at the time, modest projected increase in just general school expenses. We did recognize that, even as this was projected back in December, that it would result in a budget gap to the town. Our feeling was that this is before we had learned of the Chapter 70 bump. So our hope is that the Chapter 70 bump that came, or that we're anticipating, and that was projected after this was developed, we're hoping that it puts us in a position to provide you with a manageable budget, one that kind of fits into the overall budget puzzle. All right, Mike, you can skip ahead. So this slide here is sort of the highest level summary of the FY23 budget. It's really no longer a recommendation, it's a summary of the voted budget. You'll see that the general fund increase is $1 million, over $1 million over FY22. It's offset by a decrease in what we describe as special revenue. Special revenue, and you'll see this broken out a little bit in a subsequent slide, but special revenue refers to a variety of regular and special education grants, school choice, Medco grants, and so on. So, and probably most notably the special revenue that we received through a variety of COVID grants, the ESSER grants that were so helpful to us in getting through a really, really challenging year with COVID. So the overall budget, it's actually when you factor in the decrease in special revenue, it's a total budget that is below the FY22 level by $327,000, $876. So we'll show you how that affects services in a slide in a bit. So next slide, Mike. To give you some historical perspective, this tracks back about 10 years, the general fund request that the schools have made, and also the total budget, the bottom line on the total budget. So you'll see that the general fund increase that this budget seeks is certainly on the outer edges of where we've been in the last 10 years, but as a function of the overall budget, it is a decrease. And we can come back to any of these slides if they need further explanation. Next one, Mike. The school committee finance subcommittee has asked us to provide them with some historical information on the general fund turnback, and you'll see that in recent years we have been in a position to turn back significant amounts of money to the general fund, $995,000 in FY20, $321,000 in FY21, and we're We have not yet pinned down what the turn back will be for FY22. That is something that we'll continue to work on, and Mr. Maz will have some clear indication of as the fiscal year moves on. All right, Mike. So this is the budget by funding source, by revenue sources, and you'll see again we're largely dependent on the general fund. We do get some relief through a variety of regular and special education grants. The circuit breaker grant is used to offset pricey out of district tuitions, and we participate in METCO and school choice, and those provide some critical revenue to us. You'll notice the bottom line there is the reduction in the COVID grants, the ESSER grants that will be applied to the FY23 budget. So that's a pretty significant decrease. It's obviously one that we planned for and anticipated. These were grants that, again, helped us get through a couple of difficult pandemic-related years. And we'll give you a little snapshot of the costs that were pulled out of the FY23 budget because of the COVID grants not being available. I think that's on the next slide. So you can go ahead, Mike. So if you're wondering how we're absorbing the reduction in the COVID grants that are available to us, these are some of the investments that we made with the ESSER grants. It was important to us to have preschool registered behavioral technicians, a lot of kids who came to us this school year not having a lot of formal schooling experience. 2 middle school interventionists were deployed this year that will not be retained in the FY23 budget. Adjustment counseling services on a contract basis at the high school. Quite a bit of COVID mitigation supplies, everything from tents to desks to HVAC supplies. We needed a fair amount of staffing and supplies relating to tutoring, after school supports, summer supports, and again, those ESSER funds were critical to help us get through the challenges that we were facing this year. So this is a list of investments that will not be retained in the 23 budget, but were in place in the FY22 budget. Next one, Mike. So we wanted to, in an effort to be really clear with the sort of service levels that this budget will provide for, and make it clear that the 23 budget does represent a decrease in the overall FTEs being full-time equivalent positions. But of course, we knew that was coming because in this current school year, the current FY22 budget involves making some critical investments in personnel to assist with mitigating against the learning loss and the disruptions that kids experienced as a result of the pandemic. So it is worth kind of hitting head on and being very candid about the overall FTE levels that we have seen increase in recent years. And again, to be fully candid, to show that it's really not in response to overall enrollment increases, but it really is in response to the increased needs that kids are coming to us with each and every year. And this goes back pre-pandemic. I think the pandemic accelerated a lot of the challenges that kids are facing and accelerated a lot of the needs that kids are showing up at our doors with. But the reality is we were seeing the need for a lot of these services and a lot of these personnel going back several years. So if you're curious about, the FTE increases that we have, investments that we've made in recent years, I think the next slide captures that. So these are the staffing investments that tie back to the FTE increases that you saw on the previous slide. And again, I think this is worth lingering on because these positions, as Kevin said early on, this slide, these positions tell a story. And if you look at the sort of the common thread here is that these are positions that are needed to support the needs of the whole child, the not just their academic needs, but their physical health needs, their behavioral health needs, their mental health needs. And it's, again, this is something that school districts across the nation are dealing with, right? And trying to support the needs of the whole child and ensuring that we have adequate counseling supports in place, ensuring that we are able to intervene if we see any learning loss, ensuring that we have folks who are really skilled at developing and implementing behavior plans. Nursing services are more and more critical to the success of our kids every single year. We're really fortunate in Long Meadow that we have a drug-free community grant coordinator. This is an individual who provides some really needed prevention and intervention services for us across the town. Our athletic trainer, having an in-house athletic trainer, we thought was a more fiscally responsible way to go. And again, reflective of how important it is to support the physical health needs of our student athletes. So all of these positions really are reflective of the challenges that the heightened expectations that are upon us, the needs that children have in our schools. And I think it really ties back to that Chapter 70 aid slide, and the state recognizing that schools have had to make these critical investments, and fortunately Chapter 70 is reflecting that increased need. So again, I hope that this tells a really critical story, and it really ties into why we think that this is a budget that will drive critical strategic targets for us, and why it is really responsive to where kids are right now in Long Meadow. And next slide, Mike. So this is sort of where the rubber hits the road, I guess, and you'll see that we've listed on the left the reductions, and on the right the increases. It all ties out to a $327,000 decrease. I'll hit some of the larger figures that are on the slide in front of you. You'll notice that we're projecting contract obligations over $1 million. So again, it goes back to kind of that alone before we really even get out of the gate. We've got we really need to make sure that we have contracts in place that attract and retain the best educators in Western Mass. And so that's obviously an important part of our work. Teachers have they're the single biggest factor in a child's education. On the left side, attrition is savings associated with folks who will be retiring. And it's in almost all cases, we're hiring at a lower level on the salary schedule to replace retirees. You'll notice the $670,000 reduction in instructional supports materials and contracted services. Again, that goes back to the COVID-related expenditures that were fueled by the ESSER grants that we talked about. We have also, we are projecting a decrease in the number of special education supervisors. We have transitioned at the elementary level from having special education supervisors to assistant principals. And along with that, this budget would allow for the development of a single special education supervisor, K-5, to serve all Long Meadow elementary schools. We think that it will result in really consistent delivery of services across all 3 elementary schools. There are a few enrollment related reductions on the left side, the 8th grade staffing. We have a bubble class, a larger larger cohort of students in the 8th grade that are making their way to 9th grade. And so that additional staffing that we've had in place for them while they've been in middle school won't be necessary. We think that there'll be some reductions that we can make at the high school because of decreased enrollment. So I would just want to say to anybody watching at home that these staffing reductions are not associated with reduction in service, but rather they're associated with changing enrollment patterns. And on the right-hand side, to hit a couple more things, registered behavioral technicians. These are folks who are really skilled at developing and implementing behavior plans. We also are really certain that we're going to need an additional 2 sections at the kindergarten level, and with that comes the need for the assistants that work with those teachers. So overall, the total number of sections at the elementary level will be the same, but there'll simply be more sections at the kindergarten level. And so we'll need those assistants to staff those classrooms. This budget would also allow for an in-house athletic trainer. That is something that the school committee had moved forward with in this current school year. And now the FY23 budget would be reflective of that as well. Last thing I'll call your attention to is the second line on the right-hand side, out of district tuitions. It's actually a modest number compared to what other communities are experiencing, I'd say. In other words, as student needs have changed, as their academic needs and behavioral needs and mental health needs have changed, districts have been challenged to keep students in district. I think we've had great success with that. It has involved building up in-house programs to serve kids so that they can stay in their hometown and in their neighborhood school. So those are some of the sort of service-related factors that tie into that $327,000 overall reduction. I describe this as a budget that will provide a level of service that is consistent with where we were in FY22. Next up, Mike, I'm not sure if we have. So going forward, this is it, and then we'll sit back and listen and take any questions that you might have. We recognize that this budget has to be considered against the budget that the town is trying to put together, and whatever feedback you have for us tonight, we certainly can bring back to the full school committee. But recognizing that these are based on projections of the availability of grants. Some of these grants we don't get final numbers on until the summertime. We'll continue to watch enrollment. Sometimes we have surprising patterns that develop in the spring and the summer, meaning sometimes we see enrollment spike at a particular grade level, or sometimes it decreases. And so we always have to be responsive to that. Out of district tuitions, we plan for that. We understand the needs of our kids, but sometimes you have to make some decisions and the best way to support kids is to provide them with specialized programs out of district. And of course, we need to continue to pin down and meet our contractual obligations. So there are a number of variables that are still out there. And we know that, we're still, though it's a voted budget, we know that we're still in discussion with the town on how this fits into the overall picture. There are a few things that we're leaving on the table, sort of, in the sense that, we know that we would benefit greatly from having math coaches at the elementary level. This budget does not provide for that, but it's something that we know that we need some math leadership at the elementary level, and it's something that we'll kind of continue to keep our eyes on. And the needs of kids, again, at the risk of sounding like a broken record, we want to make sure we're supporting kids as they're emerging from this pandemic, and a lot of the at-risk tendencies that we're seeing now were existed before the pandemic, perhaps accelerated by the pandemic, but we're certainly there prior. And then, again, ensuring that we have appropriate occupational therapy services and academic services for kids. So those are some of the things that we're still kind of keeping our eyes on, and we are still in discussion on, and thought it worth mentioning as we wrap up. So that's it, I believe. I don't think there's another slide, Mike. And we're here and answer any questions you might have, and bring back any feedback that you might have to the full school committee. So thanks for your patient attention.
Thank you. Very good information. So before flipping over to the Finance Committee for questions, I wanted to give our board members first bite at the apple. So if any select board members have questions for Marty, please raise your hand. Go ahead, Mark.
Thanks, Dr. O'Shea. I appreciate your presentation. It's been very, very helpful as usual. Just a couple of comments. In the past, I kind of been, I think it's no secret, I've been critical of comparing revised budgets versus next year's projection, as opposed to last year's budget to this year's budget. So I think it's important that we note that the FTEs are actually up 11 from last year this time when you were preparing the budget. I realized that things change and you needed to increase it. And so you're saying that FTEs are down, but they're down from not budget to budget, but actually actual to budget. And I think it's important to note that. But the bigger thing that I'm interested in, and I look for year after year and haven't been able to see, and this comes with a recognition that my observation is that the population of the Long Meadows school system seems to have somewhat stabilized over the last 4 or 5 years after a period where it's declined. But the one thing that we don't generally show, which I think could be useful, is looking at the per capita spending, dollars per student, and also per capita staffing, the number of support staff or FTEs per student. And I'm wondering why you don't, or if maybe you do use those numbers, but why you didn't show those. And if you have those, what do they show to you? Not just absolutely, because absolutely they don't mean much to us, but relative to other communities who are trying to provide the same educational level that we are in Longmeadow. And how do those impact what you do when you prepare budgets?
Yeah, we certainly could pull that together for you, and it's information that is really readily available to us. We do look at that. I think the story that it would tell is that we've had to, over the last 5-7 years, we've had to make some more investments in counseling services and behavioral supports for students. And so I think you'd see a greater allocation in those areas. And I think, we certainly are fortunate here in Longmeadow to know that our per pupil expenditures, exceed, I should say that the support we receive from the town exceeds what most districts receive. In other words, Town of Longmeadow funds us well beyond what is minimally required. I think sometimes comparing per pupil expenditures from community to community is really difficult. I think you'd be surprised to see, that communities like Springfield and Holyoke actually have per pupil expenditures that are comparable to ours, but their expenses are different than ours. So, but that is information we could gather up and send off to the board for sure.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Tom.
Superintendent O'Shea, I can't thank you enough for all the work that has been put into this presentation. And, it's just, being aware of the needs of young people in this community is so important. It's one of the main reasons people come to this community, is they figure they're investing in their children's future by coming here. Now, every family comes here with their own culture. And our cultures, our family cultures aren't in a bubble just because you live in Longmeadow. A lot of what I've heard over the last year are people who would say, boy, we're having family dinners together. This has never happened before. You know, we can make the assumption that families have all their acts together and they have time for each other. But the reality is this is not an easy community to live in. We have a lot of parents that are caught in a work culture that demands more and more of their time. And when this happens, children need support. They need more support at school. One of the resources that has probably been available to young people in this community has been like community therapists. Now, I know I've talked to individuals who've been waiting months to get their children into therapeutic treatment. I've talked to some individuals who have called 40 therapists and been unable to get services. So when this kind of thing happens, the school system has to have additional services, and your budget reflects that need for our students. And I can't thank you enough, you and the school committee and folks who are involved in putting this together, for recognizing that it's, you know, students just, it isn't like their lives are so immune from all the temptations. I mean, we have a lot of children who struggle with mental health issues, with thoughts of suicide, with substance abuse. And, you know, the schools is a central place to begin to address those needs. And I appreciate you taking this step forward. And, you know, I think you've done a great job with this presentation. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. And I think, so two thoughts quickly on that is one, I would, you know, Jamie Hench said something to me earlier today. I hope you don't mind me saying this, Jamie. He said, you know, we're at a critical stage, you know, and this is the FY23, the 22-23 school year is a critical year for us, you know, and we want to make sure that we've got everything in place to support students. And recognizing that this budget, though it makes some critical investments or, you know, in the behavioral supports and social emotional supports, it also sustains all the great programming that has made this a great district for, you know, for 50, 60, 70 years. So the rigorous programming, the enrichment, the AP programming, the music programming, all those things that are the really manageable class size, all those things that make Long Meadow great are sustained by this budget. But it also helps us meet kids at a really critical moment, I think.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Go ahead, Steve.
Well, yes, I'll heap on my praise for everyone doing their job, creating this budget for us. A couple of things I want to understand is your budget in terms of meeting the fiscal needs of the town. Forget the student needs for the moment, but the fiscal needs of the town. The Chapter 70 money is basically saving our bacon. Would that be a correct assessment of what you guys have told us?
I'm sorry, Steve, I didn't catch that. It's basically what?
The Chapter 70 money has saved the bacon as far as the budget goes for the town?
Well, I wouldn't pretend to be able to answer that fully for you. I think it's probably more of a question for Jen and for Lynn, but I think it's a reflection of what is being asked of schools. So I know that while that's an important variable that we've learned about recently, there probably have been other variables that the town is still pinning down in terms of costs and revenue projections.
Okay, thank you. In terms of just, correct me if I'm wrong, you are adding 3 assistant principals to each of the elementary schools?
Yeah, the model adds 3. This year we added 3 assistant principals, and so we leveraged the ESSER funds, the COVID grants, to do that. And so while it adds 3 assistant principals, next year it would result in the reduction of 3 special education supervisors at our elementary schools. And then an addition of a single K-5 special education supervisor. So the idea is that we're transitioning from special education supervisors to assistant principals, and the theory is that assistant principals will assume all the leadership role that the special education supervisors provided, but they'll also provide some greater administrative capacity for us. So it's sort of transitioning from one leadership model to a different one.
Okay, excellent. Last point I would make to the school folks is, and it piggybacks on what Tom was saying, in terms of what the schools, and this is actually, I think, talk about education, I think school department needs to educate this community that the fact that schools are much more than ABCs. I mean, the whole nursing thing, and that thing is, what is expected of schools today versus what was expected 25 years ago it's a whole different kettle of fish. And in terms of the services that you provide up and above just classroom learning, are costly. And I think that really needs to be imparted to the community. That's just more than you're going in and you're just going to spend whatever many hours a day, in front of the class, the teacher, and then you're gone. There's a whole lot more going on. And I think in terms of making sure that the community does support the budgets that you guys have been presenting is that everybody really is aware that there's a whole lot more that's being required and needed at the schools than just the old traditional academics.
Yeah, thank you. Well said. I appreciate that.
All right, Josh.
Just a couple of things on what Steve said. On the last point, I definitely agree with that. The schools have, no one expected schools to get into the public health game, but there's been, I have 3 kids at center, and the way that things have been communicated through the kids to the community has been really important. And I'd like to just commend you for that. And then just generally on this, the budget, impressive work here, getting it to where, closer to where we needed it to be. I did have a question on the Chapter 70. This is my first time going through the budget process. And you said this is the new floor. The Chapter 70 funds are coming this year. Is that the floor? So it will only go up? Or if our enrollment goes down, would that go down? Could you just explain to me and to the town how that works?
Yeah, in fairness, it's always subject to appropriation. So the phasing in of the Student Opportunity Act is what resulted in this significant increase to Chapter 78. It's also a reflection of the fact that our enrollment went up a little bit, and the fact that the percentage of low-income students in Longmeadow has ticked up as well. So the allocation that you get for Chapter 70 is reflective of enrollment patterns. So there's a couple of things going on there. One is the phasing in of the Student Opportunity Act, and the other is the fact that our enrollment ticked up slightly, and that we've seen an increase in the percentage of students who are identified as low income. So the hope is that, you said it well, that it builds the floor, that it establishes a new floor for us, and that future Chapter 70 aid packages will build on that. Because that's been our experience for years, is that you're at the very least you're level funded, or there's a modest per pupil increase that you get. So I think it does establish a new floor for us, but it really is dependent on legislative appropriation at the end of the day.
And you said the Student Opportunity Act, did you say that was the first of 6 infusions?
Yeah,
so,
so
is that going to run out in five more years?
It will basically, at the end of it, it's not that it'll run out. It will mean that Chapter 78 has caught up to the revisions to the funding formula. So there's essentially a consensus that the funding formula was flawed, that it didn't reflect things like health insurance, technology investments, special education costs, all those things. And so this is an attempt to have Chapter 78 catch up to the realities of what we really need. So it's not that it would run out, but it would have done its job. It will have been phased in over the 6 years.
Any other questions? Very good. I just wanted to ditto the comments from my fellow select board members and say thank you for continuing to invest in our kids. It's super, super important. With that, I'll toss it over to Armin and see if he wants to solicit comments, questions from his committee.
Sure. I'll recognize Andrew.
Oh, sure. I do have a question, actually. Dr. O'Shea, thanks again, of course, for a great presentation. I know that there's a lot of thought put in that from you and from the entire school committee. But I have a question for Jen, actually, because I think the main question that I have, and I'm sure my colleagues on the finance committee are thinking about, is, Jen, after seeing, the school committee budget, taking into account this possible improvement in the Chapter 70 money, how do you think this affects the ability of yourself and Lynn to succeed in the goal of limiting the whole town's tax increase to 1.75% or less? And knowing what you do now about the town side of the budget, which we don't really know about yet, can you say what maybe the likelihood that you think it might be necessary to ask in the future the school committee to make any revisions to lower their proposed budget? Do you think there's a chance of that? How optimistic are you about reaching our original goal?
Sure. So the 700 and some change from the state definitely helped. We projected about $1 million over budget when the department requests came in, including the school department budget. So we not only, when we originally looked at the numbers in November, December, we had a $500,000 gap with the 1.75. When the department budgets came in, we were at over $1 million. So the 700 helped, but with that, there are some other things going on, the DPW reorganization being one of them. That's pretty costly, and we're looking at putting that, funding that at 100% for next year with a phase-in approach, kind of starting this year as much as we can with the vacancy savings that we have in that department. Considering the 1.75, if we accepted the budget as is, it would put the tax levy at 2 to back up to 2 to 2.25%.
You have a follow-up, Andrew?
I see Maury's hand. I'm actually thinking about what she just said, but Maury can go ahead and.
All right, I recognize Maury.
Thank you, Armand. Superintendent O'Shea, a lot has been said as far as thanking you for putting together this great presentation for us, but I wanted to thank you more generally for the fantastic job and all of the hard and tireless work that you do and have done and continue to do on behalf of my children and all the children on there. I know a lot of people on this call have school-age children that you're serving every day, and I appreciate it, and we appreciate it, and I wanted to thank you for that.
Team effort, yeah.
One of the things that jumped out at me when we got to the end of the presentation, when you were talking about your reductions and your additions and increases, was the second figure that's labeled instructional supports, materials, contracted services, district-wide, and that figure of roughly $670,000, the overall decrease of 327 or so. What I thought I heard you say, and I just wanted to get clarification, was that $670,000 was a reflection of that reduction was a reflection of COVID-related expenses. And so what jumped out at me about the away from the COVID-related expenses, that's why we see the decrease. But we didn't see a decrease of $600,000. We saw a decrease of $300,000. So my question was, to what extent are we seeing the decrease being sort of reflected in the COVID reductions primarily? And the reason I bring that up is I'm just concerned about what your thoughts are about going forward. How going forward? I guess maybe this goes to what you're talking about in Chapter 7 funds. How we're going to account for those increases once those funds are no longer available. And so, I mean, obviously, I don't have the answer to that. And I like Andrew, as a member of the Finance Committee, I'm mostly focused on that fiscal cliff number, the 1.75 figure that we identified. But without trying to micromanage what it is that you do, I'm curious, what thoughts you have on that, on what is going to be the source to make up that difference.
So if I understand the question, I'd say that the fact that we have a overall reduced budget can be tied to the pulling out of the ESSER grants that we're going to be down. I think it was over $1 million in COVID grants that be applied to the budget. So the overall reduction in the FY23 budget is very much tied to the reduction in special revenues that will be applied to the 23 budget. So I'm not sure if this answers your question, but though it's a overall reduction in the budget, I wouldn't describe it as a less than level service budget. I describe this as a budget that allows us to sustain the services that are familiar to people and what they would expect coming out of this school year. So I'm not sure if I'm totally answering your question, and I'd encourage Tom Mazur or anybody else to jump in if there's something I'm missing there.
Yeah, I think my question is just more of, again, we what you identified, it seems like you were confirming that $670,000 was $670,000 reduction was COVID-related expenses. But again, we didn't see a 600,000 or anything. It's only the reduction in the budget is less than half of that.
Right.
So that additional $50,000 has to come from somewhere if we're not receiving that COVID money. And I see.
Yeah. I think I see what you're saying. Yeah, that it doesn't completely explain it. That the increase that we're anticipating goes beyond the 670,000, and largely it's tied to the contractual obligations that we have, and that's the single biggest factor in the general fund increase that this budget would require. And Tom Mazur, if there's something that you want to add or I'm missing there.
Yeah, I think I would caution you not to tie this particular slide specifically to funding. This is more related to positions, services, materials that are changing from year to year. Some of the reductions are tied to the grants, but not specifically or solely. That 670, Maury, is not the only reduction in services that are from COVID grants. The subsequent two lines are also services that were paid from COVID grants in FY22 that are not part of the reduction or not part of the budget in FY23. So I'm not sure if that helps answer the question you were asking.
So the next two lines, because the slide deck is not up, the next two lines were the specialist teachers at Glenbrook and Williams, and then pupil services related instructional supports and materials.
Yeah, I think that particular slide you were referring to is just kind of a summary of trying to encompass all the major changes that have been incorporated, irregardless of funding source. General fund, grants, revolving account, wherever they come from, it really wasn't intended to be a reconciliation by funding source. That was, I think, a previous slide.
Thank you. Again, I was looking for some clarification on the sources of those reductions and what they were related to. So I appreciate. Thank you for your response.
Anybody else from Finance Committee? Andrew?
Oh, Don, go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, I didn't see. Sorry, Don. I didn't see you over there.
Oh, hi, that's okay. Thank you. Again, Dr. Shea, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. And going through all of the detail on it. I wanted to revisit just for a second because I'm not clear on the references that I think Mark Gold made earlier on about comparing the revised budget for 2022 to the 2023 proposed budget. And so can you just help me understand what does the revised budget reflect as compared to the 2022 budget? How did it change? And then how does the 2022 original budget compare with the 2023 budget?
So I'll answer the first part of that. I might need Mr. Mazza to help with the voted 22 budget. So the FY22 budget would have been established this time last year. In the subsequent to that, after that, we were able to access federal ESSER grants for COVID relief. And so we had essentially a supplemental budget that was tied to the availability of those ESSER funds. So you had the voted 22 budget in February of 21. And then after that, in the spring of 21, we went back to the committee with a set of recommendations on how to apply those ESSER funds. So the budget was revised to reflect the addition of those ESSER COVID funds. The actual voted budget amount, I think I would need Mr. Mazza, if I don't know if you have that handy.
Yeah, the original amount that was approved prior to changes in grants was $38,866,000 and some change.
And what are we at this year? I don't have the slides nearby. So
right now, our revised budget right now in FY22 is up to $40,635,000.
Okay, so that's how much, what's the difference?
It's about $1.8 million, and a majority of that.
Yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, a majority of that came in COVID grants. ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 grants makes up about $1.6 million of that increase.
That 1.8 increase that from the original FY22 budget.
Correct.
Right. So we're going up. We went up $2 million, give or take, from the FY22 budget in this time last year, based on those grants that came in. So comparatively speaking, while we're south $300,000 from that, we're still 1.6 above last year's original budget. Yeah, give or take. All right, am I doing the math right? Am I getting this right?
Yeah, approximately. That would be about right, 1.5.
Okay. And we're getting an extra $750,000, we know, or we hope, in terms of, what is it, Title 70 or Chapter 70 funds. So that's still $1 million increase over the original budget from last year, if I'm doing the math right. Is that right? You can see where I'm confused because I'm not seeing, I'm trying to compare. I understand we got a bunch of ESSER funds in, but those are going away, right? Or no? What's going away? And what are we, in other words, what's the net difference between the years? I'm just trying to understand percentages increase and, get that apples to apples comparison.
You're trying to understand what the difference between the voted FY22 budget is and the voted FY23 budget. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think so. And the reason why is I understand we had new revenue that came in as well. I guess the question is all of that revenue still going to be there, or is some of that revenue going away? And does that mean what is obviously year after year, our expenses increased, cost of living, all of the other stuff. I'm just trying to get a sense of what that net increase is. You know, and for example, is it more than 1.75%? In terms of the amount that the schools are spending, say compared to other departments, or is the school subsidizing other departments by giving back? You see what I mean? I'm just trying to understand the math around it.
So just a quick math, if I could. So we're up about 1.441 from the original FY22 budget to the budget that school committee voted last week.
Okay.
Yeah, and
So
that's all funding sources, grants, special revenues, and the appropriation from the town.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Sure.
All right. Finance Committee? Anybody else? Bill Welch?
I just have a quick question, Marty. I noticed there's a 2% increase in low-income students. And my question is, how do we define a low-income student? Like, is that poverty level? Is that some state of Massachusetts thing? And how do we do that?
It's a state indicator, and it's based on families and students that are accessing a variety of social supports. Tom, there's probably a better way of explaining that, but it used to be tied just to sort of free and reduced lunch, but now it has a more comprehensive definition.
So basically, about 1 in 8 students falls into that category.
Yeah, it's again, I think it's reflective of some of the demands that our families are facing and the realities that they're up against, and then the challenges that they may bring to us. Is there a better way to explain that low income designation? Or
yeah, I mean, I do think that they look at the poverty level, and I think it's 185% of the poverty level that they constitute eligibility for low income in terms of the definition that the state uses.
180% for family of 4, or do you know?
I think they have it. They have a dollar amount based on family size. They have a chart that kind of defines that.
Okay.
Bill, any follow-ups? Or are you good?
No, I'm good.
Andrew?
Oh, I guess I'll just loop back.
Yeah, you took your microphone off, so I thought you had a question. Sorry.
No, I do. I thought I'd just well, it's not really a question. I thought it'd be good to loop back to kind of Jen's initial comments, because I guess we were all kind of, at least I was kind of hoping that there might be some low-hanging fruit from the town side of the budget where necessary reductions might be easier to achieve. But it sounds like you and Lynn are going to kind of have to take a hard look at all the departments. I would only add the obvious that being able to achieve our previously stated limit to the tax rate increase is a very, very important goal for all of us. I mean, not just the Finance Committee, obviously, and I think it's imperative for us to achieve it. So I just want to say thanks to Lynn for everything you've done, and I know you and Lynn are going to try to work hard to make this work. Let us know if you have any other thoughts on this going forward. Jen? Not really.
No, I think that, like you were talking about earlier, Andrew, was, and the superintendent has expressed this numerous times, that it's a work in progress. And, we saw an 11% increase in our pension contribution, 7% increase in health insurance rates, as Mr. Gold stated earlier, and our liability insurance increased 24%, bringing on the new DPW and the new Council of Aging building. So we have other constraints that are happening at the same time. We're very grateful for the additional revenue, and I think it's still a work in progress. And if the school committee and the superintendent are still open to making amended budgets, we'd be very, very welcome to that, and hopefully we can do that going forward.
Well, like every year, that's just a lot of hard decisions have to be made by everybody. So thank you all.
Yeah, and anybody final from Finance Committee? Nora, anything? All right. So then I guess I'll just add my thoughts here. Marty, Tom, and Jamie, thanks for the budget. I know it's not easy. I've done two or three of them myself over the years. You know, the one thing that I think that concerns me is, you know, yes, we have the Marty's slide. I think it was 518,000 on the town that we're short, that, you know, Jen and Lynn are going to have to talk about and come up with. But I think the point we just made about the health insurance and the pension liabilities, you know, the 11 and 7% respective. When we're looking at last year's budget, we added, it looks like 11 FTE during the year on the school side. And believe me, you know, I have nothing but love for the schools in my heart, and I've been there, I've served, I've given more hours to the school system than I can ever get back out of my life. And so I'm not holding anybody's, you know, feet down or whatever, but we added 11 FTE. So that's not just a one-time hit to the budget next year. That's 11 FTE in perpetuity unless we make some cuts at some point. Yes, I get it was a tough year for mental health. Yes, I get there are services that we have to offer along the way, but no other department got to add 11 FTE after the original budget was established. And I know the reason why we did it. I'm just worried about what are the long-term liabilities for health insurance, pensions along the way. And, you know, so hoping that we can find a way with Jen and Lynn to cut that deficit that's there to even out the budget without having to raise the tax levy more than we need to. So Jen, I know Tom, you guys do a great job. Kudos to both of you. I know Tom, you're the best school budget officer I've ever met. So, and Jen, you know, you've been doing awesome on this side with us. So I'm sure we'll find a way to work it out, but you know, those are my concerns. So with that, Mark, I think that's it for Finance Committee.
Excellent. Thank you so much. One last go around for the select board members. Any final questions, comments? Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, I just, you know, I appreciate everyone's comments this evening. And, you know, that is a lot of change, 11.5, you know, full-time equivalencies. But I think we've looked at the budgets for the last few years, and the school budget has been a piece of cake in a way. You know, it's like Marty's come right in where we wanted him to. You know, he's been able to do that for us, and that's been great. This year's it's a tough year. It's tough to have these more difficult discussions about the budget than we've had in the last few years. But the other thing is, when I looked at this presentation, it also showed pretty significant numbers over the last 2 years that were returned to the general budget by the school department. And I don't think we want to lose track of that. You know, that, you know, if there's extra money, they give it to us. You know, they don't like find a way to hide it away from us. And I think the presentation showed that very clearly.
And Tom, I'd agree with you. There was this chair back in 2020 when they handed back $900,000. He was the ultra smart guy. So
right, yeah, we were all clapping then. We're all going, really, yeah. But this year is a tough one. Let's keep it in perspective, though.
All right. Marty and Tom, thank you guys so much for coming and answering our questions. Thank you to the school committee, the finance committee. It's great to see all of you.
Hey, Mark, we officially have to do a motion to adjourn on finance committee. Just
go for it.
I'll entertain a motion.
I move finance committee adjourns.
Second.
Second.
Roll call. Don.
Yep.
Bill.
Yes.
Andrew.
Yes.
Nora.
Yes.
Maury.
Yes.
Armin, thanks, Mark.
Thanks for having us.
Mark, thank you.
We gotta do the same thing.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Marty.
Yep.
Go ahead. Is that Kevin or Jamie?
Yep. Either or is fine. Kev, you want me? You want to do a quick motion?
Yeah, I move that we adjourn the finance subcommittee of the school committee.
Second, requires a roll call vote. Kevin?
Yes.
and Jamie, yes. So we are adjourned.
Thanks, guys.
Bye, guys.
Everybody, good night.
See ya.
Bye.
I want to know why nobody wants to stick around for these delightful select board meetings.
I tell you, get no respect. Okay, up next is the town manager's report. Corinne Meiseman's national debut.
Here we go. All right. So I think you all received this in the agenda. I'm just going to go through and sort of paraphrase what Lynn has written here. So starting with the COVID-19 update, as of Thursday, February 10th, there were 50 cases in town, and actually we received an update email, I think at the end of last week, saying that the case number was holding steady. That's a decline from previous weeks, and the majority of the 50 cases were individuals that have never been vaccinated. I think you're aware that the Board of Health is meeting tonight as well, where they're going to discuss the mask mandate and review the current data. Moving into the Public Health Excellence Grant. So the Eastern Hampton Shared Public Health Services Agreement, that's a mouthful, with Longmeadow, Hampden, Munson, and Wilbraham, created the opportunity for additional COVID-19 grant funds to be dispersed to the Eastern Hampton Shared Public Health Services Agreement from the Massachusetts Department of Public Health. And this is an amendment to the current Public Health Excellence Grant with a one-time increase of $73,854 for the distribution of funds to local boards of health and health departments for COVID-19 response activities. So as a reminder, our original Public Health Excellent Grants Award was in the order of $322,924. And then this increase, which again is for COVID-19 related expenses, brings the total grant amount to $396,778. And then the last item on the town manager's report is the casino mitigation reserve funds. So we recently applied for and were awarded the remainder of our casino mitigation reserve funds. We had $100,000 earmark from the Gaming Commission of money that was ours, as long as we could show that we were spending it on eligible projects. So our recent application was for our remaining $96,000. Which will be used to supplement funds previously approved, I think at 3 separate town meetings for the Longmeadow Street project. This is the portion of the Longmeadow Street project that I'm forgetting who brought it up earlier. Part of Longmeadow Street project is on the tip for 2024. This portion that we're talking about is a project that's scheduled for, it's tentatively on the tip for sometime in the late 2020s. So still quite a few years away, and will go towards funding design and engineering services. Again, this was $96,000 out of the $100,000 that we had set aside for us, and the previous $4,000 was spent related to traffic engineering studies along several intersections on the Longmeadow Street in or around 2016. That's it for the town manager's report. I don't know if there's any questions on those topics.
Hi, Josh.
The casino mitigation funds, I saw in the LPD monthly report there's a separate request for mitigation funds at Forest Glen Road. Do they offset, or is there a different fund for us versus what the police department would go for?
So that what I was just speaking to was the casino mitigation reserve funds, which was the money that was set aside for us, $100,000 set aside for us upon the opening of the casino. What the application that you're referring to is the casino mitigation competitive grant. So it's the same name, but you take out reserve and replace it with competitive. So that's something that's just available to communities that are within either the MGM Springfield casino radius or the whatever the casino is that's in the Boston area, only eligible for those communities. And that's a yearly competitive grant application where you can communities can apply among several different categories. So the difference being that we have now received all of the $100,000 that was set aside for our use exclusively, as long as we could show that we were using it for eligible projects. And now we're entering into competitive grant applications.
You can see my confusion. Okay, thank you.
Yes, yeah, not the same.
Josh, that grant that the police department's going for, there is a pile of money that has been set aside by the state for mitigation by other casino effects on surrounding communities. Long Meadow is a surrounding community. And so I encourage you to think of anything you can think of that says, well, we may be affected by the casino. We want funds to do the following. So if it's police on Forest Glen, that certainly seems reasonable, traffic, whatever. And actually they do encourage, if you got any thoughts about joining with East Long Meadow, the state is encouraging communities apply together for money. But there is a lot of money that's sitting around, and they did make it so Western Massachusetts, our money that's raised here is not going to Boston. It stays out here. So there's a big pot of money that's available if we can act, but we do really have to show that it's for mitigating casino, whatever the casino imposes on our community. But it's there and should not be overlooked.
Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, Corinne, just this one question is that, so the money that the town voted, the $100,000 for that study, what will happen with that? Will that go into the general fund? I don't know if you would be aware of that.
Yeah, are you asking if the $100,000 that was approved at town meeting will be returned now that we have this grant? Is that the question?
Yeah, how is that? Yeah, what happens to that money?
Right. So the overall project budget estimate for this phase of I'm forgetting the bounding streets that we're talking about specifically here, but essentially the portion of Long Meadow Street that's near Williams. That project total from concept design all the way through engineering, full engineering, is estimated at this point to cost somewhere upwards of $700,000. So we have $300,000 total that has been approved at successive town meetings in $100,000 increments that will go towards funding concept design. And concept design is estimated to cost around $300,000. So we think we have it covered. So we'll still be using the funds that were previously approved at town meeting. And then the $96,000 that we just received, or we haven't received them yet, but the $96,000 that were just approved for use in the casino mitigation reserve funds, that will also be put towards the same project, but it will be moving the project out of concept design and into the next phase. I don't know if that will be 50% design or 75% design. So basically we're building up a bank account to be paying the engineering consultants as we go.
Okay. And I guess the other thing is the mask mandate. Has the state come up with a different policy about masks? Have you heard anything about that?
I haven't heard anything. I also haven't been specifically looking over the past few days. I know that there was conversation. The last that we spoke about it in the office last week, there was a similar timeline, I think, with what we were expecting our Board of Health to do and what we were expecting to hear from DPH. But that's all I can say to that at this point.
Okay, great, thanks. Because I know that we like to stick with the state mandate, so to speak, and we take their lead on this.
Right. I think, yeah, you are probably as aware as I am that I think the expectation is that the state will be dropping the mandate shortly, but I don't have any updated information on that.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Corinne? Very good. Moving right along. Old business, approval of meeting minutes from February 7th, 2022. Looking for a motion
We
to
approve the minutes of February 7th, regular select board meeting.
I'll second that.
Mike, can you call the roll, please?
Mr. Strange,
Yes.
Mr. Moretz,
Yes.
Mr. Levine,
Yes.
Mr. Gold,
Yes.
Mr. Lacusa,
Yes.
And back to Corinne for a discussion on the water conservation bylaw.
Mike, is Mike Spear in the audience, I guess?
Yep, I'm gonna move in Mike now.
Okay, great. So I'll start us off, and we have Mike Spear here to sort of answer any technical questions that you might have, either regarding the content of the DEP sanitary survey, or how this will affect town operations. But I'll just introduce the topic. So as you all will have seen, you're probably familiar with this beforehand, but also you'll have seen in the memo that we shared with the draft warrant. I'm just pulling that up myself. The town manager's office and the DPW have collaborated on this draft bylaw that we will be submitting as a warrant article for the upcoming annual town meeting for its adoption. And we drafted it in response to the DEP drinking water programs report that was delivered to the Department of Public Works in 2021, about a year ago. And in the early spring of 2021, DEP conducted a sanitary survey of the Long Meadow Public Drinking Water Services. And so a sanitary service is an on-site review of the water sources, facilities, equipment, operation, and maintenance of the public water supply system for the purposes of evaluating the system's ability to produce and distribute safe drinking water. So one of the key findings of Mass DEP's sanitary survey in Long Meadow is that our residential per capita water use, which is reported in gallons per person per day, or GPD, exceeded Mass DEP's water conservation goal of 65 GPD. And over the past 3 years, so that's 2020, 2019, and 2018, so the past 3 years from 2021, Long Meadow's residential gallons per capita per day had been reported at 120 gallons in 2020, 92 gallons in 2019, and 94 gallons in 2018. So again, that's much higher than Mass DEP's goal of 65. So a component of the report that Mass DEP sent to Long Meadow was that we identify ways to reduce our per capita water use. And one of the ways that DEP suggested that we do this, and we agreed to, is establishing a water conservation bylaw requiring weather responsive controls on automated lawn irrigation systems. So this bylaw was developed in response to that commitment we made to DEP in order to meet DEP's water conservation goals. So in the packet that Mike sent out there, it included the draft bylaw. The memo also summarizes the purpose of the bylaw and essentially the bylaw's requirements. So I'll just go over those very briefly. The bylaw, the purpose of the bylaw is to protect, preserve, and maintain public health, safety, welfare, and the health of the environment, especially whenever there is in force a state of water supply conservation, a state of drought, or a state of water supply emergency. The bylaw goes on to define what those water conservation states are and how they're enacted. But the way that the bylaw serves these purposes is to ensure an adequate supply of water for drinking and fire protection, adequate quality and quantity of water in local aquatic habitats such as ponds, rivers, and wetlands, and that Long Meadow's per capita water use is in line with Mass DEP's water conservation goal of 65 gallons per capita use per day, or as amended. The bylaw accomplishes those purposes by establishing non-essential outdoor water use restrictions triggered by declarations of the states of water supply conservation, drought, or water supply emergency, each as defined in the bylaw. Those are consecutively escalating states of water conservation. A requirement for all customers of Long Meadow's public water supply to register new and existing in-ground irrigation systems with the DPW's water department, and a requirement to properly install all in-ground irrigation systems in accordance with the uniform state plumbing code, with the addition of timing devices that can be set to make the systems conform with the town's non-essential outdoor water use restrictions, with moisture sensor or weather-based irrigation controllers, and with backflow prevention devices that would be approved by the Board of Water Commissioners, AKA the Select Board in Long Meadow. The bylaw also establishes the procedures and criteria for issuing and terminating declarations of water supply conservation, drought, or water supply emergency, and also identifies the enforcement authority, procedures, and penalties associated with the violations of the bylaw. And so wrapping up my introduction to the bylaw here, I want to remind the Select Board that we're not asking for any action at this meeting. More wanted to introduce you to this bylaw and the drafted bylaw, give you the opportunity to ask any questions, clarify any points of interest before you see it as a warrant article coming to you.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Tom.
Okay, so a couple of things. One is this moisture sensor that folks who use an irrigation system have to have installed. Any idea on the cost of those?
I don't. Do you know that?
No.
Okay. And now, when people put in a watering irrigation system now, do they need to pull a plumbing permit at this point?
I believe they do. I'm not 100% sure. The water department has never seen any permits pulled by anybody.
Yeah. Okay. Because it looks like this thing is going to talk about the moisture sensor, so we want to have a sense of, we want to know exactly how much it's going to cost people.
Yeah, there's two kinds of sensors. You can get the moisture sensor where it senses the moisture of the soil, or you can get a rain sensor. When it senses the rain, it shuts the system off.
All right. So
most systems have the rain sensors, but sometimes they're just so old that they don't work anymore, and people don't realize it.
Yes. So that was, when I look at phasing in something like this, I think that, some people who have recently made an investment to do a watering system, I think we shouldn't be too hard on them right from the get-go, because I think it's important for the town to water the older trees that have a tendency to fall down if they aren't maintained with watering systems. And I think that it makes the town look nice, but I do want to have some, start moving and phasing in some water restrictions. And so I think this water sensor is a good thing. I think it might be best, and I don't know what other people on the board would think about this, but I would say that people who put in a watering system 10 years ago, like in the year 2000, or no, 20 years ago, the year 2000, so that they should be the first ones that they should be inspected to see if their water sensor is working, and they should be said, this is where things are going, you need to put this in. The next phase would be people who have installed a watering system perhaps since the year 2010. And if we had permits on it, it would be easy to sort these folks out. And then I think the third phase would be for people who have recently made the investment to let them know if they don't have a sensor system in there that they need to get one. And, we could phase this in over a few year period. I think that's the most fair way to do it to our residents, because as much as we probably think that watering is the biggest part of our water expenditures. I don't think we're going to say, well, we're just the cleanest people in the valley, because people are taking more showers here than anywhere else. It's probably watering. But the other side is that what kind of restrictions are going to be placed on places that are dependent on watering for their livelihood, like country clubs that have huge lawns that have to be gone, colleges, we only have one, and churches. Is there going to be any differentiation between watering systems for a profit versus a nonprofit or anything like that? It doesn't sound like it.
So, sorry, Mike, you saying something?
Bay Path is on a well for their irrigation.
Okay.
The country clubs use their ponds for irrigation.
Okay.
They don't use town water for irrigating the golf course.
And I'll also add that the bylaw does, in the definition section 4, define non-essential outdoor water use. So the restrictions that come on with the 3 different states that this bylaw describes, basically it gets stricter and stricter on what non-essential outdoor water uses are allowed or not allowed. Section 4, the definitions, describes non-essential outdoor water use shall mean those users that are not required. So the following are exempt: watering for health or safety reasons, by regulation, for the production of food and fiber, for the maintenance of livestock, or to meet the core functions of a business. So if a business, as you, Tom, were just bringing up, were to be negatively impacted because of its core functions, or needing to have a serviceable lawn, for example, or something like that, for whatever, whether it's a golf course or whatever type of business might need that, that would still be labeled as essential outdoor water use, and so essentially wouldn't be under the jurisdiction of this bylaw.
Okay, thank you very much for your help.
Josh.
I Googled a water sensor. It looks like you can get one at $150 for a moisture sensor. Installing it, I don't know about that. But just a few comments. I think that this is an important thing to do. When you see our numbers compared to what the goal rate is, or other towns, we are off the charts in water. And I think it's great to do something to try to cut back on that. And if there are water sensors, it's going to people will get a lower water bill by doing that. If you drive around town when it's raining, you'll see people watering the lawn. The sensors don't work, or they don't even have one. And it's unnecessary, and we can really cut back on that. We should do something before the state or Mother Nature does it for us. So and as for Tom's idea about the phasing in, logistically, I can't see how we would do it, especially if permits weren't pulled. So that brings us to my first question. It would be, water sensor would be required to be put in for when any system is serviced. Would that include the blowing out of the systems that I know happens every year before the winter? Is that what was envisioned?
I think if there was any repairs made to the system, like sprinkler heads, or if their lines were frozen and they had to replace some lines.
So how often does that happen generally?
Quite a bit, because there's some people that don't blow out their systems, and they go to turn it on in the spring and they find leaks.
Okay. And Then on the definitions, I noticed one of the exceptions were specifically non-essential is irrigation via sprinklers or automatic irrigation systems. And then exceptions to non-essential are irrigation by handheld hose controlled by a nozzle or drip irrigation system. How about, what are we envisioning for like a sprinkler that's attached to a hose, but it's not an automatic irrigation system? That seemed kind of like a middle ground to me. How is that envisioned in this bylaw?
So forgive me if you said this at the beginning of what you were saying, but also in the definitions, automatic irrigation system includes sprinklers. So sprinklers and shall mean any system for watering vegetation other than a handheld hose or bucket, as you just said. So I think the sprinklers here, and Mike, if you disagree, please speak up and maybe we'll realize this is something that we have to clarify in the bylaw. But the sprinklers here in my mind are any type of sprinkler, anything that's not literally hand watering. And the reason for that is that people aren't going to stand out there and hand water for hours, you know, that you automatically are limiting how much you're watering if you're saying that you have to do it in person.
Yeah.
Whereas you're not necessarily limiting that if you're screwing on a sprinkler and just turning on the nozzle to your hose. Is that what you think, Mike?
Yeah. I mean, a sprinkler is a sprinkler because someone could turn on a sprinkler by hand, walk away, do something, and I got to go to the store, and 5 hours later come back and he's still watering his lawn.
So how would that be enforced if somebody left a sprinkler on and during a drought somebody sees it on? Mm-hmm. Does the bylaw allow the town to go on and turn that off? I know that irrigation systems have to have a turn off. Okay.
Yeah, so the bylaw requires that that there should be an external external faucet. Yeah.
Okay.
So, right. So the enforcing agent can go in and turn it off. And to that point, Josh, that's a good point. The enforcement of this bylaw does really rely, especially if there were not plumbing permits pulled for irrigation systems, which I didn't think to ask Paul that, and I have a note to now, but in terms of my conversations with Jeff McAlmond and Pete Thurber and Lynn, that has never come up. So I don't know that there's a plumbing permit requirement for this. The enforcement of this bylaw is really going to rely on visual sightings of things of like watering happening when it shouldn't be. And so that would be, whether it's a sprinkler, as we were just talking about, or a more a fancier irrigation system that's going on during a rain event, or when we know like it's been a 3-day rain event and now the ground is totally saturated, but someone's irrigation system is coming on. And then as we move forward in years, we'll start to have records of who does have irrigation systems, but right now it could very well be that we don't have that.
I can add to that. I've had experience with elderly people calling and complaining about their water bills, and we do a profile and find out that it's their irrigation system, and they have no clue as to when it's been turned on. They go, well, my irrigation company turns it on for me. So, and like I said, they have no clue as to when it waters, how long it waters, and so on and so forth. So I think we need to maybe get some kind of educational material out to the elderly that have irrigations that aren't aware of all this technology.
Steve.
Yeah, in terms of, let me get this straight. The reason this bylaw is coming into existence now is because the state has basically told Longmeadow we need to get our act together because, as Josh said, we're off the charts for water usage. What this bylaw does, with the exception of the rain sensors, which I assume will reduce usage, but certainly not cut it close to in half, which is what we need. This has nothing to do with reducing water usage in normal times in Long Meadow. These restrictions are only going to come in under this succession of drought emergencies. Correct?
Oh, yes. So well, there's sort of two answers to that. One is that, as you said just now, the water sensors or moisture sensors in the ground will cut we'll call it like errant irrigation happening. So that will reduce water usage to some degree during normal times. I don't know if there's Mike, I don't know if you know, if there's a way to predict how much, errant irrigation is happening. That's happening when it shouldn't, when the ground doesn't need it. That will happen no matter what, because the sensors are always on, right?
Yeah.
But the states of water conservation, states of drought, and states of water supply emergency, those are when either the Board of Water Commissioners / the Select Board, Springfield Water and Sewer Commission, and or DEP can make those announcements and then say, okay, not only do you have to have these sensors on your irrigation system, now we're going to start to say you're not allowed to water except for on odd numbered days, even if you have the sensors on your irrigation system. Or now we're taking it one step further and you're not allowed to water at all until this date. So that's when those more drastic steps come in.
Right. So let's assume relatively normal moisture comes along, and so we now have the rain sensors, which will reduce our water usage by some amount, but obviously not the amount the state wants us to do. Do we know what the state is then going to tell us? Because I don't see how this is going to solve their issue with us.
As long as they're seeing us trying to conserve water, they'll be lenient on us. But if they see that we're not trying to conserve water, then they'll make us conserve water.
Right. I think that this, us adopting this bylaw is sort of like us checking the box. It's not the box in this case is not reduced to 65 gallons per person per day, but take these measures to show that you are working with your residents to educate them around the topic and to fix problematic practices. So in that case, by adopting this bylaw, we will be able to check the box. But there are other in the sanitary, and I can't speak to what they are. I don't know if you can, Mike, right now, but there are in the reports, the sanitary survey report, this is not the only measure DEP asked us to take. I can't speak to what the others are myself because this is the only piece that I've been asked to work on. But there are other steps as well. It's not just the irrigation systems.
Right. They did mention, which you people have discussed in the past, irrigation meters. And that's one way to reduce the per capita gallons, because that's not registered as far as gallons used per person.
Wait, did I just hear that right? So we've come up with a winter averaging way of identifying how much water people use for irrigation. So then we could report that and subtract that from our gallons per use per person.
That I can check into.
All right. Because that would be an interesting figure for us to look at, to see if we may be closer than they think.
Good, Mark.
Corinne, I appreciate the time and effort it took to write this proposed law. I think, though, that given our town meeting and what it is, we can't just publish it and think it's going to pass. I think this is going to be a tough sell, in my personal opinion. And part of it is we have to do some education.
Yeah.
Primarily, I think Tom identified a couple of things. It's going to cost people with sprinkler systems money, whether they have a rain sensor or a moisture sensor or something like that. The concept of registering, and I'm saying this to somebody, I don't have a sprinkler system, so I'm kind of got no dog in the fight here. But I'm just saying that if we're going to do this, and I support doing it, we can't just publish it and cross our fingers, because the only thing worse than not doing this is proposing it and having it fail at town meeting. Mm-hmm. And that's a possibility without a significant pre-sell, if you will, to residents at town meeting. It seems to me on the outside that there's not a lot of, punitive or, register your sprinkler system and put in a moisture sensor, but I think we found in the past that some of these requirements or requests come off unusually in town meetings. And so my only recommendation would be that if we're going to publish this, we're going to promote it at the town meeting, we need to do more than just, print it in the warrant and say, oh, don't worry, everybody's going to vote for it. Mm-hmm. Like I said, if we propose it and it fails, we're in a lot worse shape than having not proposed it at all.
Yeah, that's a good point, Mark. We have been in the town manager's office. We've been talking about repeating what I understand the office prepared for last year's annual town meeting, which were educational videos explaining the ask in each warrant article, in addition to having those, italicized descriptions below each one. So that's definitely something that we will be doing for this bylaw. But I think what you're suggesting is that there could even be a more robust public education sort of like outreach notice, at least, about this beforehand. So that's something that I will, discuss with Mike Spear, Mike Barbieri, and Lynn when she returns. I think it's a good idea.
Yeah, I'll be glad to help. I mean, like I said, the bylaw is pretty long. People aren't going to read it.
Right.
You need one of these, 5 bullet summaries that tell people, here's why you should be approving this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. And the long bylaws tend to get a lot of outsized attention at the town meetings. I think one thing would be for the educational part of this, what will happen if we don't do something? And I don't know the answer. I don't know if we've ever been told the answer to that. I assume something will happen at some point. But I think that people need to know the consequences.
Mm-hmm.
It's just,
go ahead, Tom.
One other thing is sometimes if you know that there's, let's say there's 10,000, watering systems, internal watering systems, maybe we could get a price if we bought, 10,000 units and had, or got bids, competitive bids for the exact, say here's, for the first 10,000 people who sign up, you can get this for $100 installed. That might be another way to approach it, rather than, if they're not sure, if they think it's going to cost me $200, I think it's just another tax. And then if there's concerns about hiring a person for DPW to keep track of all the watering systems, then they'll say, well, that's going to affect our overall budget as a town. And so we have to approach this wisely. I do support water conservation, and I want to see this fly also. I think it's a good program, but we have to frame it in the right way.
Anything else for Corinne? So we don't need to vote on this, right? This was kind of like a heads up.
Yeah.
Yes, correct.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mike.
Yep, thank you.
Next up is the one-day liquor license application for the Adult Center. Is Mary Beth on?
Yes. 1 second.
Mark, I'll make a motion that we approve a one-day liquor license for March 8th, 2022 for the International Women's Day showcase at the Council on Aging.
I'll second that motion.
Any discussion? Mike, can you call the roll, please?
Mr. Strange?
Yes.
Mr. Morantz?
Yes.
Mr. Levine?
Yes.
Mr. Gold?
Yes.
Mr. Lacusa?
Yes.
Very good.
Thank you.
So moving right along, we received a request to make a proclamation regarding World Autism Day and Month. So I think I'm going to read the proclamation, and then I'd look for a vote or a motion to approve the proclamation. 2022 World Autism Awareness Day and World Autism Month proclamation. Whereas autism spectrum disorder affects an estimated 1 in 44 U.S. children and 1 in 45 U.S. adults, and is a complex condition that affects each person individually, resulting in unique strengths and challenges. And whereas autism can cause challenges with verbal and nonverbal communication, social interaction, and repeated behaviors, and can affect anyone regardless of race, ethnicity, gender, or socioeconomic background. And whereas autism is often accompanied by medical conditions that impact quality of life, and whereas a comprehensive collaborative approach will help to advance research, providing a better understanding of the many forms of autism, strengthen advocacy efforts, and ensure access to services and resources throughout the lifespan and across the spectrum. And whereas early diagnosis and intervention tailored to individual needs can have lifelong benefits, easing the transition to adulthood and fostering greater independence. And whereas each person and family affected by autism should have access to reliable information and supports. And whereas autistic people should have opportunities to reach their full potential, and the whole of society stands to benefit from this. And whereas the town of Longmeadow is honored to take part in the annual observance of World Autism Month and World Autism Awareness Day to address the diverse needs of individuals with autism and their families. Now, therefore, we, the Longmeadow Select Board, hereby proclaim April 2022 as World Autism Month and April 2nd, 2022 as World Autism Awareness Day in Longmeadow to create a kinder, more inclusive world for people with autism spectrum disorder.
Mark, I'd like to make a motion that we accept this proclamation for World Autism Day as written.
Second.
Mike, can you call the roll, please?
Mark, can I just make a quick comment? I support this motion. I guess my concern is, and this has come up in the past, is do we have policies about what, when, where, and how? You know, because the ones we like, we can approve. Does that mean the ones we don't like, we shouldn't approve? And are we going to run into trouble once we start approving proclamations of Tree Day, Autism Day, and then somebody comes along with a proposal that we don't like? And I know other communities have run into those issues in the past, that, you know, once you put up somebody's flag, you got to put up everybody's flag. And there comes flags that you may not want to put up, and you run into court issues. And so, you know, I support this. I think it's the right thing to do. But I think we need a policy on whether we're gonna just blanketly approve everything that comes through, or we're not gonna approve anything, or we're gonna have guidelines. And I'm saying that only because once you start down this path, it's a very difficult path to stop.
Well, we don't have to approve these. I mean, this is a vote. If people want to vote no, you can vote no, right? I mean, this one's an easy one,
right.
But if one that comes along that's a little more controversial, maybe not everybody fully approves it. I don't think we need a policy on it. Just my opinion.
Okay.
Just making the policy in itself could be problematic. I see what you're saying, both marks, but yeah, that's a tricky one. How often does this come up?
Not often.
Well, but not often, because 7 years ago, we said we wouldn't do it. And because we were getting them all the time, and we stopped doing them. And I related to the flying the flag, because that was the issue at the time, and I don't even recall whose flag it was, but that's the only reason I brought it up. I think it's a great, this is a great cause and a great reason to do this. But all I'm looking forward to, Josh, is are we opening up, other people coming forward? I mean, policy can be as simple as it's got to be requested by a Long Meadow resident, or, and I'm not trying to propose the policy now, but, otherwise we're going to get outside emails from who knows who, where, asking us to approve days so they can check off we got another town to go along with XYZ day. I've probably taken up more time than this is worth, but I thought it was worth making that comment and noting that.
Any other comments? Mike, can you call the roll, please?
Mr. Strange?
Yes.
Mr. Morantz?
Yes.
Mr. Levine?
Yes.
Mr. Gold?
Yes.
Mr. Lacusa?
Yes.
Thank you. Last but not least, let's see here. There was recently a resignation from the school committee by a member, Bronwyn Monahan. And so the town clerk sent us a note that says, since the nomination papers that Bronwyn's last day will be June 14th, 2022. And Kathy Ingram's note says, since the nomination papers are still available until March 8th, that she recommends that the select board vote at the meeting on February 22nd, 2022 to direct her immediately add this future known vacancy to the 2022 annual town election warrant. The remaining term would be for 2 years. The select board meeting on February 22nd is the last date for the select board to direct this office to add this to the election schedule. Beyond that, it'll be too late to add this to the annual town election ballot, and will result in the select board and school committee having to go through the joint appointment process.
Well, we're lucky. Today happens to be 2/22/22. I'd like to make a motion that we add this opening to the town election warrant, and that we accept, that it would be posted as a 2-year term.
Second.
Any discussion? Go ahead, Mark.
I hate to be in a position to correct Catherine Ingram because she knows all and sees all, but I had a conversation with her today, and I believe that nomination papers are supposed to be picked up by March 4th and returned by March 8th. I just, I'd like to encourage people to apply, but just be aware that it may be the Friday, March 4th that you need to pick up the papers by.
Yeah.
I'd hate to have somebody show up the 5th or 6th and be shut out.
Yeah, it's an important clarification.
But whatever, we should add this to the I support adding this to the ballot.
Okay. Any other comments? Okay, Mike, call the roll, please.
Mr. Strange,
Yes.
Mr. Morantz,
Yes.
Mr. Levine,
Yes.
Mr. Gold,
Yes.
Mr. Lucusa,
Yes.
All righty, that's the end of our agenda for tonight. Just a reminder that our next meeting is March 7th. We'll be live and in person at the high school after a long hiatus. We're looking forward to that. And at this point, looking for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Strange,
Yes. You're muted, Mike.
you read my lips. Mr. Strange,
Yes.
Mr. Morantz,
Yes.
Mr. Levine,
Yes.
Mr. Gold,
Yes.
Mr. Lucusa.
Yes.
Have a great night, everyone.
Thank you.